Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So today I am finally back at it again with another Pokemon artwork. It feels like quite a while that I've actually done one of these and I absolutely love doing these. I'm a huge Pokemon nerd, as you guys probably know unless you're new here. But yeah, I decided to draw Dragapult because it is one of my favorite new Pokemon from the new Pokemon games, Pokemon Sword and Shield. So today we are doing a digital artwork, and I decided to do digital this time because it has been a little bit of a while since I've done a completely digital artwork, and I love doing these because they're super fun, especially at times when I can't be at home. I have things to do. Sometimes I stay at my partner's house and I'm able to get in some art done using my iPad Pro, which is amazing because it's quite convenient for me. And I also really do love doing digital art. I love the techniques and the different effects you can get that are kind of difficult to get when you're doing it traditionally. But anyways, one of the cool things about this Pokemon Dragapult, it is a dragon type Pokemon that looks like a jet fighter plane, and it also has these hollow horns which it carries its babies in, and it shoots the babies out, and the baby, which is called Dreepy, they love being shot out, and it's actually sort of part of Dragapult's signature move, Dragon Darts. I just find that really creative and interesting, and I love the sort of concept behind it. And when I learned about this Pokemon, there was two things that I actually decided. I really wanted to make an illustration, a sort of portrait of these guys, but also I'm totally gonna shiny hunt this guy in Pokemon Shield. I actually have this plan at the moment where I want to shiny hunt all of the dragon type Pokemon in the game, which is crazy. But could you imagine if I had a shiny of every single dragon type? I think that would be pretty awesome. But I think I'm getting a little bit off topic here. I am an art channel, not a PokeTuber, even though that would be super awesome if I was. But yeah, I'm an art channel, so let's talk about the art in this video. So for the specific pose, I actually had something in mind when I actually started this artwork. I really wanted to have Dragapult sort of floating in the air with its tail sort of curling around a little bit, and I wanted to have one of the Dreepy sort of shooting out of its horns at the viewer, if that makes sense, and try and get like a nice sort of foreshortened effect where the Dreepy is obviously bigger than it looks, but that's because it's sort of, you know, coming out towards the viewer. And I thought that would be really cute because Dreepy is a super cute dragon type. And I wanted Dragapult's face to have a sort of sly, suspicious look on its face just because that would sort of suit the Pokemon. But the Dreepy has like this adorable, happy, sort of thrilled face because this is Dreepy's favorite pastime, being shot out as an attack. And I just absolutely love that concept. I know I keep going on about how I love the concept, but seriously, it's probably one of the coolest dragon types in the games. So the program I'm using today is Procreate for the iPad Pro and obviously my Apple Pencil. I'm not sure if I said I was using Procreate. I know I said I was using my iPad, but anyways, that is my go-to program for digital art. It's just as good as Photoshop, if not better, because it's really intuitive and awesome to use. And I'm using my typical sort of line art style where I'll have different sort of line weights here and there. Definitely thicker lines on areas where I want to emphasize something, like the triangle shape of Dragapult's head, as well as a little bit of thicker lines around the Dreepy to show that he is sort of in front of Dragapult and give it a little bit of a depth effect, if that makes sense. And yeah, so I'm actually using two different brushes for the line art. The first is the technical pen brush. It's a really good sort of like a fine liner brush. There is a bit of line weight variation, but overall it is quite thin, and it's really good for sort of like thin details. It has a really nice sort of crisp look to it, and I love it. And the other line art brush I'm using is the Studio pen, which is a little bit more like a brush pen. It has more sort of line weight thicknesses and thinnesses, so it has a little bit more pressure sensitivity, if that makes sense. And I really like that one as well because it is quite a bit larger than the technical pen. So when you want really thick lines, it gives a little bit more of a crisper edge compared to when you turn the technical pen brush to its full size, if that makes sense anyways. Onto the coloring phase, and this is one of the parts that I love the most because it just sort of brings the art to life, and it really completes it, like figuratively and literally. Anyways, so I love Procreate for this because it is really easy to get a sort of nice coloring technique down, because you have all of these different sort of settings that you can do. For example, I like to make the line art layer a reference layer, which is very, very helpful for one thing, and that is that you can sort of use the paint bucket tool / color drop on different layers, and it will still color in areas where the reference layer is. So it uses the reference layer as a sort of reference, obviously. But this is really convenient because I can sort of use the paint bucket tool to color in block areas and still preserve all of my line art to a different layer, which is great. After I do this, I like to add an alpha lock to the layers that have all of the color on them, and to do this you just use 2 fingers and you swipe to the right on the layer, and that will basically keep all of the areas where there are no color blank. So basically you can draw over it, and it'll stay in the lines that you've already sort of created, if that makes sense. That is very, very convenient for shading and also coloring of the line art, which I'll get to later. But yeah, because Dragapult actually has a few different gradients, it's not just block colors, I like to use the Airbrush tool and using this alpha lock technique to add a sort of gradient to Dragapult's body. So the top half has a sort of dark bluish gray color, and then it goes to a nice sort of like a cyan-y aqua sort of color, and then towards the end of its tail it goes to a really light color, almost white, and I really love that sort of gradient on him. I think it just looks so cool. So after I get the basic colors down, I'll leave them for now, and I'll actually go back into the line art layer and I'll do that alpha lock that I mentioned earlier, and I'll basically just add different colors to the line art, because I find when you have black line art it doesn't look as good as it does when you add different colors. The different colors just sort of add a little bit more life, a little bit more vibrance to it, and make it look really good. So I really like the look of that, and that's why I do it, I guess. But yeah, I add sort of darker colors of the areas that I'm outlining, and this will basically sort of have the line art be less intense while also still emphasizing different areas that you want to emphasize. So for the shading, I'm actually doing something different than I normally do. Sometimes I like to sort of experiment, and this time is definitely one of those times. So I actually went in with a charcoal brush which has quite a bit of texture, and I first went in with black. Don't worry, I'm going to change it later, but I went in with black and shaded in some areas that I wanted there to be shadows. Now after this I actually added alpha lock to that and changed the colors to different shades of purples, and that's for a specific reason, don't worry. And after that I added a slight Gaussian blur to it, and I did this because I wanted a little bit of texture eluded, but I didn't want it to be like too crazy. So having that sort of really textured brush and then the slight sort of Gaussian blur on it, it has the hint of that texture, but it's not like overly crazy, but it's also not overly smooth, if that makes sense. So for the shading colors, I decided to go with purple, and I decided to go and do the same thing with yellow for the highlights. And this is just because they are complementary colors and it would just look really nice and stand out, but also because I wanted to add purple background, and purple shadows would just help sort of tie them into the background and make them look like they're sort of, you know, they're part of that scene. And yeah. So for the background, I wanted to do something fun, something a little bit interesting. I didn't want to just have it as an environment where the Pokemon live. I kind of wanted to have a little bit more of a stylized background. So I actually decided to go in and experiment with some different colors, and I decided with purple. And yeah, I actually went in and I sort of drew a very sort of rough sort of dragon shape, as if it was like sort of curling around. And I experimented with a few different lighting effects just to see what I could create. I wanted to have a sort of, I don't know, an essence of like a dragon, but also have sort of ghost elements in there as well, because this Pokemon is dragon and ghost type, which is super cool. But yeah, so I roughly sort of just drew in some different effects and different light bubbles, and added some blurs in there and chucked a few sort of layer styles into just to see what kind of glowy effects I could get. And I moved it around, and I did quite a bit of experimenting in this just to see what I could create. But overall, I decided on a background, and I really ended up liking it because it's not too crazy, but it is kind of detailed, and it sort of supplements the Pokemon and sort of highlights them and brings your eye into the characters themselves while not being overly busy, if that makes sense. After this, I decided I wanted to add a few little effects, mainly some sort of movement lines from the Dreepy to show where it's coming from, and it's being like flown out at Mach speeds. So I wanted to have some little lines sort of coming off of the horns as if there were sort of air trails. I don't know what that's called, but you see it often with sort of fast flying fighter jets and stuff like that. So yeah, I basically just colored in some lines, and I erased quite a bit of it to sort of give it a bit of a streaky look. And then I had a lot of different layers of them and just different sort of blurs and motion blurs and stuff on them, just to try and give it a look that I was aiming for. And overall, I settled on this sort of look, which I am quite happy with, and I do really like it. Another thing I actually did was I duplicated the layer of Dreepy's tail, and I sort of added a bit of a motion blur to that. Now it's quite subtle, but I really like how it looks, and it just gives a little bit more motion to the Dreepy. So yeah, after this there was just a few touch-ups here and there. I wanted to add some extra little bright highlights just to emphasize different areas and give it a bit of a shiny new look to it. And yeah, I'm actually very happy with it. So anyways, here is the final results, and I love this digital artwork so much. I'm really sort of satisfied with my digital art when I draw Pokemon, so I kind of feel I should do that more often. So let me know in the comments below if you think I should do some more digital Pokemon art. I'm definitely up for it, so if you guys are up for watching that, it'll happen. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please smash like, subscribe, chuck a comment in the comments below, and let me know what you think of this drawing. And of course, I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone!